Hi, friends. Welcome back to Unfeigned Christianity, where we seek to find culture biblically nuanced in Jesus, embodying responses to current day issues. I'm excited today because I have a friend, Lowell Herschberger, on, and that concept of culturally aware Jesus embodying responses to current day issues. Sometimes we look at different social issues around the world today, and we can argue almost everything has two sides to it, right? And we have these binary arguments, the right and the left. How do you alleviate poverty? How do you do social justice work? And is it even a thing that Christians should do or get involved in? Lowell Herschberger works as a social worker. I think he's actually let his social license lapse currently in the project or the role that he has, but he's trained in social work and in social sciences and has a real heart for helping people in New York City, particularly those who are needing to develop sustainable income and developing projects for them and education for further training and so forth. And it just, through his work and through work like this, you discover the issues that culture deals with, the issues that people in society deal with, regardless of what we think is right or wrong. Like, there are very real issues that we have to deal with, and what does it look like to embody Jesus in those situations, and how can you enter and not just talk about doing justice or not just talk about caring for the poor or the homeless, but actually do something about it. And that's what Lowell's going to share today. I'm excited to have this conversation with him and share it with you. We talk at the very end. We spend 20, I'm not even sure how long, 10, 15 minutes discussing the concept of gratitude, particularly around racial justice. There's some history where we have, whether you think of Native Americans on reservations and how they should be grateful that America is actually providing schools for them, giving them funding for all these things. Or if you think of black people and at least they're not savages, hunting for their own food and so forth. Why are they ungrateful? Why do they still want certain work of justice to be done? And that's been very damaging in the work of justice to culture and society, to push that need for gratefulness. But Lowell also has shared some thoughts on the importance of gratitude in the work of justice, and particularly rather than expecting other people to be grateful, but just ourselves, having a grateful spirit for the people around us and for the community that we are living in. And so we share that at the very end, and that's available for members of Unfeigned Christianity on Patreon. If you would like to access that expanded version, just click the link below or go to asherwhitmer.com/member, and you can learn more about that. Without any more noise, let's get into my conversation with Lowell. Well, I'm excited to have on the podcast today Lowell Herschberger from New York City. Welcome to Unfeigned Christianity, Lowell.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Lowell and I we kind of know each other's families from way back. I think it was just in 2020 through the Restorative Faith Collective. We kind of started, at the very least, having conversations together and doing some events together. We've had the privilege. I guess we didn't quite make it to your house when we were in New York City a couple of years ago, but we were able to have breakfast together. And you were out to California, and then also here in Colorado, we were able to see you. So it feels like we've been able to connect several different ways over the last few years.
Yeah, it's been great. A gift through the pandemic. We got to know each other. So
yeah, I one of the reason I invited Lowell on is because he works as a social worker. Is that your title?
It's
I should
not.
have
I'm
got that.
actually technically I've let my social work license expire with the arduous continuing education credits, so I'm not technically,
Okay.
I suppose, a social worker, but I my title is director of career and education programs, but it's the roots of social work. I'm passionate about social work, educated as a
Yeah.
social worker.
Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes those who follow my podcast and blog are familiar with, especially in the last few years, writing on various aspects of justice and racial justice, social different forms of social justice, and sometimes we can have these conversations, and it feels very theoretical or
Mm.
even theological or whatever, and some questions that I've received and questions I've had myself are like, so what can we do practically, whether it's in relation to race and just the dynamics part of that conversation, or whether it's in relation to poverty and helping, we can debate whether or not socialistic policies are helpful or not, but
Hmm.
at the end of the day, like, what are we doing as Christians to be a part of caring for the poor and helping people? I've always enjoyed hearing what you're doing in your work in New York City, and then even just we've had some conversations where I didn't really know what to do, how to help out, especially when we lived in Los Angeles. Some people, and you've been a place of resources and just pointing me to different organizations that are out there that has been really helpful. And so I just thought it'd be fun to hear your story, like what got you into social work, what all is that like? What is, you said you're director of current education programs.
Yeah, I think it's a great profession. I happy to be on here just to make us pitch for if you're a young person and considering careers. It's a fabulous career option. I remember when I was in high school, I was kind of toying with what career to consider, and I remember noticing that I get bored quickly, and then I thought that if I go into social work, that would probably not be boring. And I was very right in that respect. I haven't been bored since, some 25 years later. So people are infinitely
Interesting.
complex, and situations are maddeningly complex sometimes, but beautiful at the same time. And I've really enjoyed my career. I went to Cedar University for social work education in the 90s, and then on to Ohio State. Go Buckeyes! And for a master's degree in social work. And I've worked in a few different settings. I think one of the misconceptions about social work is that there's sort of one picture. People often get exposed to like one part of social work, whether it be child welfare and the adoption system, or whether it be general welfare and the sort of public assistance system. But actually, social work is incredibly broad. There's so many different things. About 60% of counseling that's done in America is done by social workers now. So there's therapists who are social workers. There's in community development people like me who focus on economic issues and community empowerment. And there's, just almost every field you can imagine where there's people in need, there's social workers. And I've been really blessed to be part of that.
Yeah, yeah, I know. We where we live now is Canyon City, Colorado, and close to New Horizons Ministries, which focuses
Mm-hmm.
on helping people that are in prison, and then children that whose parents are in prison, and different, a lot of foster families or families with adopted kids. And I've heard various stories of like how crucial that social worker is in the process, and how, whether it's a good experience, bad experience, and even just,
Yeah,
I'm
and
sure it's pretty stressful.
well, it's beautiful to have a Christian in social work, because I think, what better way to be the hands and feet of Jesus than to be in situations where people are in pain, people are in frustration, people are confusion, people are angry. And so, getting in there and being in those places, I think is just so important for anyone who cares to be in. So,
Yeah. So what specifically do you do
sure.
now?
So Like I said, I got into social work 25 years ago and have worked in a couple of different roles. One is a teen pregnancy prevention director. I worked in mental health settings, but for the last 19 years, I've worked for Cypress Hills Local Development Corporation, which is a nonprofit in this part of Brooklyn, one of the lower income areas of Brooklyn. And our mission is to revitalize this community, to really help the community be better in many ways. And so my role is one of the division directors, one of 6 division directors. And so I oversee a portfolio of programs really designed to help alleviate poverty through creative solutions. So we have 5 different tracks of job training. So healthcare, technology, construction, transportation, and food service. And then, so that's sort of the basic traditional job training, state voluntarily funded combination of government and foundation, corporate, individual gifts. And then I run a internship program for high school students in the summer. We have about 800 youth that participate in that program, where we place them in the community with businesses, and the city pays their wages. So in New York City, every neighborhood has somebody like me, and that runs this summer youth employment program, they call it. It's the largest youth program in the country. And so for this neighborhood, that's one of the things I do. And then we also do some work with businesses. We have a community kitchen where culinary businesses that are home-based. We have a lot of home-based businesses in this neighborhood. You know, in New York, everybody's got to hustle, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody's got a little something on the side. And so a lot of caterers, a lot of people that make, you know, one thing or another from their country and sell it on the street. So this is a licensed kitchen where they can come out of what we call the shadow economy into the traditional economy, where they can get licensed and have the supports of what it means to run a business in America and grow their business and get financing, et cetera. And then we have a merchants association and business consulting, where we work with businesses to, you know, address issues of, you know, random fines. One business came in with, they got a fine because their freezer was too cold. So there's random regulations that step in the way of businesses being effective. So it's really just a lot of different creative solutions around poverty that I've been able to develop and be part of. It's been really exciting. It's why I've stayed there for now 19 years, is because I've been given a lot of flexibility to create things and to get creative and to partner with foundations and corporations and donors, government agencies, to sort of put the pieces together and make it available for the neighborhood. So I've had a lot of fun. A lot of this, I started as assistant director of youth and family services, working in after school programs. So one thing led to another, and here I am now.
Yeah. Share a little bit more, the whole concept of a shadow economy, and like people, what is shadow economy, and then why is that a need to, you know, to help? Like, why would people not just go do what they need right away?
Sure. Yeah, no, that's a very interesting concept. I mean, New York, I think, is unique in that it has a really, really high immigrant population. And at any given point in the history, it's, I think, probably pretty much always been at least about a third immigrant population, and another third that's like one generation away from being an immigrant. And then the other third is longtime New Yorkers. So it's a transitional place. It's a place where people come in, pass the Statue of Liberty, and make a life. And part of what that involves, a lot of times people bring skills, but they may not bring them in the way that they can use them here. Like, for example, they might have, you know, had a business in their country making, you know, flan, let's say, or salsa, or a restaurant or something. And the regulations in New York City are very different in terms of health and Department of Buildings and Department of Fire Department, all these different regulations that go into place. And so a lot of people don't have the time or financing to sort of set up an established business with a brick and mortar location. And so they're just very hardworking and entrepreneurial, and they go about, you know, doing what they do and selling the products. And so it's a very inspiring and vibrant energy that comes with the immigrant population. And I'm really excited about that. And it really warms my heart a lot of times. But the challenge is with it is that it's really hard to make a real living with that, because it's hard to get financing, for example, right? Or it's hard to go to scale. You know, you might be making something out of your home, but you only have one stove, one oven. You get a big order of, you know, 500 pies, you can't fill it, right? It's just not realistic. So really being able to go to scale and getting an income that to raise a family on requires that you kind of get educated on the various licenses that are required, and then also to get the financing that you need to be able to borrow money to get a brick and mortar location. You know, you need to show documented income, right? So a lot of times it's cash economy, right, is part of the shadow economy. So there's not the documentation. So just getting that income documented is really important to get then the financing that you need to expand. So it's hard and it's complex, unfortunately. But, you know, there's about 300 businesses on Fulton Street alone, which is one corridor in our community. Most of them are immigrant owned, mom and pop, really grassroots kind of businesses with 2, 3, 4 employees that are in the process. I mean, some of them are still in the shadow economy, I would say, and some aren't, but they need that technical assistance. And there's quite a bit of impetus. I think the New York City recognizes the value that this population brings. It's always brought to New York City. And so figuring out ways to help them, you know, transition to the formal economy is something the city is invested in doing as well. They're not trying to find them out of existence, you know. So it's exciting to be that middle person.
Yeah. I think of, compared to LA, and I don't know if this is unique to LA, but how many immigrants in New York City would be like they entered illegally some way or another? Because
that's a good question. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's a big aspect of shadow economy in LA.
Sure.
Is I sometimes I hear people like, oh, they paid for, you know, $10,000 vehicle cash, and they assume it's drug money, which could be, but a lot of it is people in the shadow economy where like maybe they were just trying to get, like it's really hard to get into the U.S., especially from Mexico or a country in South America. And maybe they crossed illegally. Maybe they were fleeing back in like 2018, 2019. A bunch of Syrians were immigrated. I always get it mixed up. Is it emigrated or immigrated when they come in because of the war? And so we had a family where she was a doctor and he was a architect, like a pretty high up architect, but they didn't have any licensing or anything here in the States. And so he was doing day labor job at some kind of metal manufacturing thing. And so just kind of understanding some of those dynamics that cause people to, they have these skills and they go under in the shadow, I guess you could say.
That's huge. That story is not unique and it repeats itself, you know, many, many times. I know a person who was, was a major, senior administration of a large university in another country, 15,000 students, and he was in senior administration, and now he's working, I think, security guard maybe at a homeless shelter. It's really sad that talent can't be utilized. And in terms of the percent that are able to work versus undocumented folks, I don't know what that percentage is, but I mean, a lot of who we work with are documented. I'd say partly because of our programs and the way the funding works, we're mostly, permitted to work with documented folks. So we actually, don't even reach, the biggest need really is undocumented for sure. And we did have a construction career open house last week, specifically for Spanish speakers that were not documented. And there was an overwhelming need. It was like, the office was packed out, probably 50 people, 60 people showed up. So there's the life of an undocumented person. I don't care what what the pundits say. It is a hard life, and nobody in America would want that for themselves or for people they love. Nobody's getting a free ride. I can tell you that from personal experience. It's a really, really tough, and only the most resilient and hopeful and hardworking people can survive that status. So I feel some kind of way when people talk disparagingly about that population, just because I know lots and lots of people in that category, and they're some of the best, hardest working people,
I'm going to back up a little bit and just this whole concept of social work. Now you're a Mennonite, right? An Anabaptist.
Yeah.
So what, Yeah, how in light of so we don't get involved in politics, right? Or we don't
Hmm.
and I think so maybe this exposes like some misconceptions of what social work is, but I'm curious what was that did you ever bump into any obstacles whether with your parents or your church or whatever like as you
Hmm.
considered that field or yeah, what was that journey like
Yeah.
as a
Yeah, I think I didn't know what I was getting into. I was really fortunate to go to a Christian college, evangelical college, that really, in every social work paper we wrote, we there was a portion where we would write, so how does this relate to my Christian beliefs, and how does this integrate? And we talked a lot about integrating faith and practice. There's a North American Association of Christian Social Workers that I've been involved in. So I've had the benefit of some real mentoring and some real coaching in regards to to this social justice work and how it relates to faith. And I've actually and I've had people ask me, how can you be a Christian social worker, or can you be a Christian social worker? Is that even a thing? And it always kind of stumps me, because I mean, my faith is why I'm a social worker, right? Like,
yeah
it's not in spite of, it's the whole point. And
yeah
I was just in preparation for this, I was just jotting down kind of like some of the what I would consider like main tenets of social work, like sort of the holy grail of social work, like what is social work as a profession kind of believe. And I came up with three things. I don't, this isn't very well thought out, but number one, inequality is a thing, right?
mm-hmm.
And that individuals deserve respect, deserve to be listened to, deserve to be supported just by virtue of being a person, right? And systems matter. That systems affect behavior. And all three of those, I could, this isn't a place for a sermon, but I could easily articulate how all three of those are not only supported, but actually kind of, I see Christianity as the basis for those three. The
Mm-hmm.
value of the individual, the image of God, right? It's just right there, that everybody deserves respect. I don't care who they are. I don't care what situation it's in, that. And so coming from that basic tenet of valuing people, to me, is the essence. And I haven't had that many sort of conflicts between my sort of religious beliefs and social work. I just feel like, Jesus said the greatest commandment is love your neighbors. But loving God, and second is loving your neighbor. And I think in my career, I've tried to just do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you love your neighbors yourself. That's kind of what you do in social work, is just loving your neighbors yourself. And you
Yeah
kind of just focus on that, and everything else is, as Jesus would say, less weighty matters. And I just try to focus on, and kind of one way I think about it is like, until I do that perfectly, I have no business like going down into the other ones so much. And I haven't done that perfectly yet. So I'm still working on I've still gotten to I'm still stuck on the first and second commandment, I guess you
yeah
could say. And so I try not to get in, if people ask, or, if there's, a reason to sort of get into other issues, sure. But I think love is the essence of who God is. And I think is the essence of what good social work is love.
yeah
And so that's why it's worked so well for me, I think. And I cringe when I feel like people get politics or other things kind of wrapped up in that kind of like derail it. To me, it's indicative of not keeping love at the center of who
mm-hmm.
God is, and what He wants us to do in this world.
Mm-hmm. You're saying you cringe when other social workers get politics and all that mixed up, or just people in general?
Well, both sides
Yeah,
actually. I
yeah,
think I think there are both sides. I think there's an element of social workers that, yeah, I think there's actually this is a whole concept we could talk about for a while. But there are elements of what I would call the extreme right and the extreme left that actually, to me, look a lot like each other, right?
hmm.
Where they're kind of devolved into this notion of us versus them, and there's an enemy out there, and it's the other side, and my job is to defeat the enemy, right? But I think, if you look at Martin Luther King or any of the older, more foundational voices in social work, they didn't really see it quite so dualistically like that. Like they saw every person as a person of value, and even, the opponent that you might be advocating against is a person who has value and is worth listening to and has wisdom, frankly, to be understood. And so we get, I think part of the tragedy of the last, 4 or 5 years here in the political environment is that we've become more polarized both. And I see that again on the radical right and the radical left, which I think I've both been exposed to actually here in New York.
Yeah, and I think it's so easy to fall in the trap of some of these conversations. It feels like it's amplified the last couple of years, and I don't know if that's accurate or not, or if we're just kind of immersed in. It seems like there's conversations that, like when you read the scriptures, it seems fairly clear that Christians should care about them, but then you have them also as national political conversations that are from a different angle, and so it feels hard to, in the Christian world, to navigate that because we've gotten so immersed in the right left politics of it all, and that's why I enjoy talking with you and other people. Like, two of my siblings are nurses, and sometimes through the pandemic and everything, like even medical perspectives have become politicized, and you like talk to people who are actually in these fields, and you realize like there's a whole bunch of nuance to it all that is just, Hey friends, this podcast is brought to you in partnership with the Dwell app. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Dwell Audio Bible app, but this app is phenomenal. It's changed my life in several different ways. As a Bible college student, I do tremendous amounts of Bible reading throughout the semester, more than I normally do. And I'm not a fast reader. And so one of the ways that I have been able to keep on top of the Bible reading is through the Dwell app. One of the things I really like about it is there's very meditative, reflective music played in the background of the reader. So it's not dramatized. Some audio Bible apps are dramatized, and that's a little, I don't know, not my cup of tea. But it's a very calming and just peaceful way of having the Bible read to you. There's at least 15, I think there's close to 30 by now, different voices that you can choose from. There's many different translations you can choose from. For the ESV, I think there's maybe 2 or 3 voices, if that makes sense. But there's over 15 voices for sure. And so you can have a female voice, you can have a male voice, you can have a British accent, you can have an American accent, you can have a Canadian accent, or I like the British accent, so I listen to the Bible in the British accent, and it's been a really good way to keep on top of my homework. But also, I have found sometimes I'll be listening to audio Bible as I commute someplace, or as I'm doing some other work, or even in the morning. Sometimes it's hard to wake up, you're tired, and to sit down and read, it literally feels like an intellectual exercise. It's like school, like starting your day with school. And I love learning things, but I don't do well at starting my day with school. And so when you wake up and you're tired, but you want to meditate on the Word of God, to just put in my AirPods and listen to the Dwell app is an incredible way to start my morning, just in peaceful worship, meditation. I hear things differently when I hear it being read than when I read it. I personally think you should read and hear it both, but that's one thing I like about audio Bible is different things stick out that didn't stand out before. I'll listen to it as I'm going on a run or something, and I can't say enough good about the Dwell app. And so if you would like to take your meditation, your Bible reading to another level, you can also, if you're not able to sleep at night, you can put in your AirPods and listen to the scripture being read and fall asleep that way. I've used that at times as well. But you can start for free. There's a link in the description below, or you can go ahead and purchase the annual plan, which I have, and to me it's very much worth it, just in the way, a couple things, the way it helps me meditate and kind of a fresh view, a fresh experience with scripture, and then also the way it helps me keep on top of my homework. It's been very helpful for me. I have 2 questions. I'm not sure which one should go first. One is, what are some challenges you've faced, and then what are some lessons you've learned? And maybe we'll start with the challenges.
Sure. This afternoon, I was at the office and I spent 3 hours doing some work that has no bearing on people or goodness or God or anything. I call it administrivia. And so there in social work, there's always a good portion of the time, I'd say maybe a third or so of my career, where I do things just to keep the government agencies happy or just to document, things. And it feels very, very bureaucratic and very frustrating and very much like a waste of time. And so that's frustrating. And I think that's just part of, working in these kind of disparate systems. You sort of have this large bureaucratic government system that's, has pledged to help or wants supposedly to help, or the political leaders say they want to help, but the solutions are misaligned with the community. And so I always tell my staff, I'm like, there's these two big boulders. There's the resources and then there's the community, and we're the little tiny person sitting in between. So if you feel squeezed, it's for good reason. I think navigating systems, navigating bureaucracy, trying to connect solutions to needs, I think is the quintessential work of a social worker. And in that, there's always frustration. In that, there's frustration. Just, one funder will give you $1,000 per student to serve. Another funder will give you $3,000, another $5,000. And for all of them, you're sort of beholden to the same results. And you take it all because you need the money, but it just doesn't make sense. And it's really frustrating and exhausting to kind of like put all those pieces together. So you have to have an appetite for complexity and doing those. So that's a big challenge in the sector. And I think people in lots of places would resonate with that in terms of social work. And it's just one of those things you just kind of, I always say it's like even Tom Brady's got to tie his shoes to go to the Super Bowl. So you got to do those basic things if you're going to play the game. Yeah. Unfortunately, that takes about a third of my time, especially in administration, which is what I do. So other challenges, I think, when you have needs that you can't meet, right? So we're always faced with situations where what we have doesn't work or isn't enough, where you have a person who does well, who's, gone through the program, but then just, gets lambasted by a family member that, pulls him out at the last minute and makes him, provide childcare or something. I don't know. Just there's always situations where you do your best, you think you're making a difference, and then it just kind of falls flat on your face. And I remember the song that Martina McBride sings about doing it anyway always resonates with me, because it's sometimes you build it, you do what you think is going to be helpful. A storm comes and blows it all away, and you just start over again. And you have to have that mindset of that it was worth it anyway, even if there's no great monument to show for it, or not the results that you want to do. And I think actually the Christian worldview is super helpful in this respect, because, God noticed, right? So, God noticed, and you work as unto the Lord, right? And so everything you do is worth it and has meaning, even if, you don't see the results, or you don't see the results you want. And so I remember my mom used to say, when she was alive, she used to say, our job is to be faithful. And I think that mantra is super helpful in social work, is that we're faithful. Sometimes we're successful, sometimes we're not. But God calls us to be faithful and leave the results with Him.
Yeah, that's really good. I was just, as you were talking, I was just, you've been at this 25 years, 19 years there at Cypress Hills or Cypress Park. Mm-hmm. I always get, in LA, we had a Cypress Park, so I get them mixed up. What keeps you from getting burned out, or have you gone through burnout? Like that thing of like putting a lot of energy into something and then just watching it kind of fall apart. Like that can be extremely wearing on vision and just energy. Yeah.
It has been. I, take God's commands for rest seriously. There's a reason He said that, right, about rest. And I try to remind myself that I'm not the Savior. That's helpful. It's easy to do this work and think that you're going to make, you're going to make it, you're going to do it right. Right. Other people didn't tried this and didn't do it well, but you're going to do it right. I remember actually one thing that I thought early on, a couple years in here, this has been a real kind of saving thought for me, is that because I really felt called here, right? Like I feel like God called me here, and I was here a couple of years, and I was like, is this what you call me to? Why'd you call me here again? And then the thought crossed me, is like, and it was almost like God said, maybe I called you here to teach you something. Maybe you're not here to save this community, right? Like maybe you're not here to make a difference. Maybe I just called you because I wanted to do a work in you, and maybe you're not really here for this community. And that was kind of a little wake up call, but it was actually a very beautiful and peaceful thought. Because I'm like, God, what are you teaching me in this situation, right? I'm not the solution for this community, right? You're the solution. And what are you teaching me in this situation? And I think that's where burnout comes from, essentially, is when we try to take God's place and we try to do, take God's role, and naturally we can't do it. And so it's discouraging. So I think that's more than anything has been one of the key things. So like recognizing what my role is that I'm, Martin Luther King said the arc toward justice is long, but it bends towards, no, I forget. I'm gonna mess it up. But the whole thing about the arc being long, but it bends towards justice, right?
Yeah.
That, I have to think about that. It's like, okay, I'm just leaning in, right? I'm just a part of this thing. It's a long thing. It'll go on after I'm gone. It started long before I was here. I'm just one little piece in this grand plan that is leading towards God's plan for this universe.
Yeah, that's good. What do you feel? I was thinking about this too, as you were talking about the bureaucracy and everything, but in a world run by secular governments that really are kind of ultimately selfish in many ways, like is it possible to do justice within that system, or like how is it always going to end up coming up short, and how do you navigate that? Or
I don't think I think again, you get discouraged and throw up your hands when you think about, like, as if my job is to fix everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's actually very important to think of yourself as just that little part, right? And so you're saying, I mean, I think that's a good question, right? Like, so you're in dysfunctional systems. You're in a government that is not going to provide what people need. You're in this, corporate, I get corporate money, right, from big banks that are, on the other hand, are doing horrible things in other parts of the world. So you're in this kind of dysfunctional system, right? And I think the importance is to recognize the smallness of your role and yet the greatness of that, right? Like that you're doing something, right? And like the classic story of the man with the starfish on the beach, right? There's thousands of starfish, and he picks up one every 200 that he passes and throws it into the ocean. And he says it made a difference for that one. And I think recognizing both the smallness and the greatness of the work is what helps you keep on going.
Yeah, that's good. I'm learning things about life and ministry and work, even in non-social work, because I think it's so tempting for us to view, and I don't know if this is like our day and age, or if this has always been, but like we want to be the hero. We want to be the hero of the story, whatever work we're in. And that's actually, like you said, the kind of the recipe for burnout, as opposed to just recognizing our place. And
there's a really nice picture I have in my office that I like, and I'm sure there's some people are kind of like, what is that? But it's a picture of three young girls that are huddled together in a tight huddle, facing each other with their backs to the observer. And it helps me remember that I'm not the one that's giving life here, right? Like they're supporting each other. And it's kind of like my work is done when I see people supporting each other, when I see people connected and people getting support from each other. So again, taking yourself out of the center of the story is really important. I think we tend to put ourselves at the center of the story, and we're just not that powerful.
Yeah, that's good. Those are some things that you've learned in light of some of the challenges and so forth. But I'm curious, yeah, what are some lessons you've learned, or even just the way your perspective has changed in light of what you've seen and experienced in your work?
Yeah, I think another one that I would say it's a thought I had early on, actually the very first time I was here, and I've really held on to over and over again, is this thought that you earn respect not by being like someone, but by respecting them. So in other words, I'm the white boy from the Midwest. I'm coming to 99% people of color, New York City, Brooklyn, and I'm trying to think about how to fit in and how to be effective and how to get respect, from the teens that I was working with. And early on, I had this thought, and it's really held on to, is that you don't have to be like a person, in the sense of like know all the lingo or know all the the latest thoughts, or talk the right way or whatever, even say the exact right words, right? But it's about really respecting people, and that people, when you respect people, they respect you, right? And being a constant learner, right? Like I feel like I am a learner every single day, and I think that posture of learning, I think, is really core to both my faith and social work. That I don't know it all, and isn't that great? It's cool because I get to learn every single day, and everybody's perspective is different, and everybody has a story that's different, and everybody has experiences that have led to them feeling and thinking the way they feel and think, and it makes sense to them, right? So just stopping and just really being curious and learning, I think, is really one of the pieces of social work and my faith that I really hold on to, that I think is really important for all of us to do. You don't have to be a professional social worker to do that. And I think the people that have made the biggest impact on me is people that have been, warmly curious of me. And I frankly don't do that great of a job like that. I don't think I do that really well. Usually I'm busy trying to make some bureaucrat happy. but when I'm on my good days, I remember that and try to listen,
Yeah.
I think that's one thing I've learned.
Were there any assumptions that you brought into whether it's the field of social work, or specifically New York City and different issues that you deal with there, that you were kind of proven wrong, or like you had to adjust in that?
I think I'm constantly testing my assumptions. I actually had a meeting this week with some of our businesses, and I had to kind of think like, wait a minute, in what way am I just thinking that this would work better because it makes more sense to me, or in what way is this really important? So I think I'm constantly testing my assumptions, and I find that it's still, 19 years later, I still bump into things as like, I thought that would work because that's the way I would do it, but that's not the way they would do it, or this person, and recognizing, and not just me versus the community, but like different parts of the community, like this person would see it this way, this person sees it this way, this person sees it this way, and just recognizing all the multiple perspectives. And I do think, there's lots of assumptions. I feel like I'm constantly testing my assumptions and questioning, I'm trying to think of like specific ones, but even the presence of graffiti, that's a good example. So my assumption is graffiti is bad, right? And I do think it is. It says something negative most of the time, but that's one where I've had to kind of like, well, what does it accomplish exactly, right? Like, what does it really say? And one of the things we're dealing with now in our community is skyrocketing, house prices. Over 30% of our community pays more than half of their income in rent, right? So when you pay half your income in rent, that's, you don't think about it until you're in that situation, but it's a really hard way to live. And so I've actually just in the last couple of months, I've been thinking about that. Like, maybe some of this graffiti is not so bad after all. Maybe it puts some of the gentrification on pause. I don't know.
Interesting.
Or related to that, actually, as the Merchants Association, last year we paid a lot of money to get people to come, and where the subway train has like these pillars that come down to the street, and
Yeah.
then people put signs on those, like they'll put like apartment for rent and whatever, some little advertisement for something that they're doing, whatever. And it gets unsightly because it's put on with tape, and then it gets wet and falls off, and so as the Merchants Association that I was coordinating, we put quite a bit of money into paying guys to go along and clean those off and to repaint them and make it look nice again, right? So fast forward a year later, they're almost all covered again, right? Like I noticed that the other day. I was like, man, like, what do we do? Do we pay more money and get this cleaned off again, or what? And then I got to thinking. I was like, well, maybe that's our community bulletin board, right? Maybe that is the way our community communicates with each other. Maybe we do want to have a place on every corner where you can say that your pet is lost and that they should return it. Like maybe that's not such a bad thing to have, apartment for rent with, maybe we could, because if we have all those cleaned off, then we should maybe get like a community bulletin board or something. Then there's another expense, right? So maybe we should just let some things happen the way they happen. So little things like that. I think we were constantly testing assumptions and like, maybe it was just, I like the clean look, but maybe the community wasn't so much in favor of that after all at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, anything more that just you want to share? I'd like to dive into a little conversation around gratitude in the work of justice. But yeah, is there any last?
I think I'll share one more story around racial justice that was really impactful for me. So we had several Black Lives Matter events, that in our community, and we're kind of wrestling with how to respond and what does our community want. And I, as convener of the Merchants Association, of course, it was an important issue, right, for our merchants, and thinking about safety and thinking about our relation to the police. And I actually sought out one of my colleagues, African American, and just talked really frankly about what I'm struggling with, because I feel like on one hand, I want to advocate with the Black Lives Matter folks. On the other hand, I have merchants who are also people of color, who are concerned and wanting more police presence or wanting protection and don't want the police defunded. And I said, what do I do? I'm trying to decide a position on this. And she was really powerful and supportive. She said, maybe it's not up to you to find a position on this. Maybe your role is to encourage the voices that you're hearing, to encourage those merchants to speak their concerns, to encourage the young people in your programs who are on the other side of this argument, to speak their concerns, and to bring them together and have real dialogue about solutions. What does it take to live together in peace and safety in our community, and to bring the police together? Because I think that's part of our role is to as a nonprofit, we're often seen as a convener, and it was really a powerful conversation. And I think it actually helped me to relax a little bit and think that, communities really are capable of wrestling with these issues. And it's not up to me, the white guy, to figure out the solution on this, and that there's people of color on both sides of these rallies, and they both have legitimate points. And I think as the Ministry of Reconciliation, I think, is about bringing people into places where there can be dialogue and where there could be some listening and some new solutions. And we've had, several meetings with the precinct here during that time and since, and some really, really cool things are happening. It's not going to make the news, but I think that's where Christians too need to avoid getting caught up in the rhetoric and the headlines, and to talk to real people on the ground that are experiencing these various things, and to be part of facilitating, if anything, dialogue just by showing a spirit of listening, right? and by showing a spirit of curiosity. And that's really what people need is curiosity. And I've enjoyed my role as sort of the professional in the group in the way of like as a social worker, like my role is not to have the solutions. My role is to connect the dots and to bring the right people, and the people from city government and precinct, and bring the people into the room so that we can have these conversations. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good because we get so focused on our positions, and then we'll use like a person of color who says, something that sounds like right wing, or and have them fight against each other when really they're all addressing felt issues. Like there's
yes,
issues are real, and we all like it's not about like who's right or wrong, but like how coming together and how can we
yeah,
navigate through them.
we're
Yeah.
part of real solutions on a real level. I really, I'm even the other night, the State of the Union was on, and I was like, I don't even want to watch. I don't care anymore. Like I used to be glued to those things, like
Yeah.
I don't care what he says. It doesn't matter. What I care about is what the business on my block, owner is saying, or what the young person on my street is saying.
Yeah. 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 Well, thank you, Lowell, for taking the time to have this conversation. I know
Yeah.
it's getting late for you on the East Coast, especially. But I don't know if it's just a way of de-stressing, if it's a hidden dream, or I always appreciate whenever you write on your blog. You have a good way with words. Is that something you do actively? I haven't seen anything recently. Have I just missed it, or are you?
Well, first of all, I'll say I'm grateful for you, Asher, and all the writing you do. I feel like you do an amazing and have a really powerful role in our churches around your writing. I do like to write. I've always liked to write. The in social work, if you want to get into social work, you got to write. I one semester I had a stack of papers that was about this thick.
Oh wow.
Our professor told us we're doing this because you need to be able to write when you're in social work. You got to document everything and propose stuff. But I do think it's powerful, and I think we should all try to find our voice, right, in whatever way that happens. And for me, that is writing. I enjoy writing. It helps me get my thoughts down, and I think everyone should find something where they can express themselves. I've enjoyed that. Thank you. Appreciate it.
What's the name of your blog again?
It's lajourney.net, and everybody asks, what does that mean? And I'm not even sure what it means. I just randomly picked it. So it's lajourney.net. I'm not going to LA. I'm not on a journey to LA. I like New York, but it's lajourney.net.
LA Journey. So if people want to go peruse his writings, lajourney.net. But he's lives in New York. Yeah. Well, thanks for the time. Thanks for sharing with us today.
Thanks so much, Asher.